What is up, everyone? Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. My name is Chris Weiser here with our VP of Member Services here at Figure MSP, Ryan O'Hara. What's up, my brother?
How's it going?
Going pretty well. Tweaked my back yesterday somehow. I don't know. So I'm like a little bit, hurting. I don't know. It's just like I feel fine, but then it's like, I can't. I'm not very flexible, and I need to get more. I think I'm getting old, and I need to start doing yoga. I think more yoga. I do like yoga like once a week, but I think I need to do it more often because I'm just getting tight and I'm not flexible enough. So that's
anyway. I feel really bad for you since you did it golfing, and
I did do it golfing. I think.
We've only just started to get warm enough weather to where
I'm literally 50 rounds in the year, and it's April. So that's why and for those of you guys that don't know me that well or don't know me at all, I used to live in Milwaukee, which is upper Midwest. Ryan's in Detroit, also upper Midwest. Mm-hmm. It's winter. It's basically still winter there. I mean, it's probably still snow on the ground, huh?
We got 78 today.
Wow. Okay. It's 72 here right now. So I'm in Austin, Texas now. So, okay. So we are going to talk about the security stack today. This is a really, really important thing. Really quick. I was not here last week. You guys, Ryan, you just mentioned I'm a golfer. I was at the Masters last week. It's very exciting to me. This is like a bucket list thing for me. So I took my wife and it was really cool. But you guys covered some stuff last week. Why don't we get into your slides here and we'll talk about that. For those of you that are watching live with us, feel free to comment. We're going to be taking some of your comments live. We're going to be talking about some of this stuff. Also, please pay attention and please keep an open mind. There's a couple things that we're going to talk about today that you're probably not doing. And I'm going to be very honest with that. I'm going to say 20% of MSPs I run into are actually doing a good chunk of what we're seeing. And I'm going to say less than 5% are doing all the stuff they should. Would you say that's off base?
I would agree. And this has been one of the more popular responses to any of your 300 plus a seat type posts. What are you including in the stack? And a lot of debate back and forth about what's necessary, what's not necessary. But this is probably one of the questions that comes up the most in the Facebook group. What is included? What are you doing for security? So and at the end, if you stick around, we've got the brand new stack checklist that will.
I forgot about that. I gotta put that in here. I actually forgot to put that in here. So I'll do that while you're talking.
There you go.
So okay, I'm gonna share your screen. I'll let you kind of go through that. And Ryan and I are going to talk about things. Please pay attention, guys. Please keep an open mind to this. I know there's definitely some of you guys that are out there that are watching this are like, I don't need to have this. My clients are fine. Be mindful of that. And also in the Facebook group, if you're watching on YouTube or on a recording or on LinkedIn, these don't exist, but on the Facebook group, our IT and MSP business owners group on Facebook. So if you go to Facebook and search that, we have a whole section in that group called guides. All of these videos that Ryan and I did the last 3 weeks. So I wasn't here last week, but that Ryan did last week. And then we had marketing and sales training in front of that. That is posted in the guide section. So you can go back and watch every one of them. Okay.
And I highly recommend you do, because I mentioned this, I think, on every one of these that we've done together. If you don't have the sales and that you don't have the marketing in place, this stuff that we're talking about today doesn't even matter because you don't have clients to put it on.
Well, it's not just the clients. It's we talk about this a lot. We talk about the $300 per seat thing or the more. Like we've been seeing around $400 to $450 now. It's kind of our net new normal now. That means you're charging the right way to your clients and you can afford to put the right tool stack in versus the flip opposite, which is I'm not charging enough. So I don't know how to talk to my clients. I don't know how to go back to them and get money. I don't know how to do all these other things and I can't provide this. So I just avoid the whole conversation. We're rapidly approaching a place. In fact, I think we're kind of already here in this, especially in the United States, but we're rapidly approaching a place where you are going to be mandated to put a full security stack in for every client, every seat, every one. So please be mindful of that. Okay, Brian.
What does that mean even? Because a lot of those things are very intentionally vague, right? So you gotta figure out what they mean by that.
Yeah.
The last 4 weeks that so this is the fourth week. So the last 3 weeks that we've been together, we started off talking about the tools in our cybersecurity risk assessment stack. So one of the things that we talk about in our program, all roads lead to the cybersecurity risk assessment, because you cannot make a decision as a business owner on how you want to protect your business from a security standpoint without knowing what your risk looks like. And that's part of the problem, is most business owners have no idea what their risk looks like. Their entire idea of what cybersecurity means is, I don't know anybody who's had an incident. And I guarantee you that most of them do. They just don't talk about it. So that's
I have antivirus, right? That's what they think is their solution to all this.
Yep. And there's MSPs out there that feel the same way. So, it's important to understand, for both parties, what that risk looks like, so you can have a better outlook on how to make that decision. The week 2, we talked about standardizing your stack, kind of the philosophy of how to build out your stack specifically to be able to scale. We talked a lot about how the precious metal plans are dead. Offer the plan that you know is what your clients need, and stick to that consistent stack across the board as much as possible, because that's going to help you scale. It helps you from a standpoint of training your techs. You don't have to train them on 8 different platforms to try and solve things. It really helps the customer experience, because every time you get a ticket, you don't have to figure out, okay, what stack is this client on? What stack is this client on? So really keeping it standard and kind of some different ways to think about it. Another thing we talked a lot about on that one was that there is no perfect stack. We're going to talk a lot about that again today with some of the security tools that we talk about. Don't get hung up on trying to find the perfect stack, because even if you were to find what you think is the perfect stack, I guarantee you 6 months down the road, there's going to be something else that comes along, whether it's a new threat that you got to protect against, or a new tool that solves for some of these things. So don't get too hung up on a perfect stack. You're going to be tweaking it as you go. So just get something out there that solves for the things that you need to solve for.
And one thing I wanted you guys to understand also, Ryan took his standard regular MSP and converted it completely into a cybersecurity focused MSP. So he's been down this path internally. He's now our VP of member services over here and kind of manages this whole system for our clients. But it's an important thing to understand that he's walked the walk that he's asking you guys to go on.
And the thing that reminds me of as well, and you need to understand and consider, this is not something that you can decide and turn on overnight. There is a process to this where you have to learn some things. You have to get educated yourself. We're going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity frameworks today. It's not something where you just add a couple of tools and all of a sudden you're doing cybersecurity. It's something that you really have to study and get up to speed on before you can truly be offering cybersecurity for your customers. And then last week, we had a guest host, Lindsay, who was with me when we talked about the support stack. So I kind of broke out the tool section of what we were talking about into the support stack and the security stack. So last week, we talked about the things that go more for the support side of things, like your PSA, your RMM, really the things that a lot of people probably have already in their stack. Today's topic is going to be more focused on the security pieces of the stack. This is where I expect to have probably some more comments and some more questions. And I suspect there's a lot of people out there that have certain pieces of this stack, but very few out there probably have everything that we're talking about. And when I went through and started building out the categories for the security stack to really dial this in from a presentation standpoint, what we did was we looked at it from the framework, from the standpoint of cybersecurity frameworks, the tool stack section of that. So these are all the pieces that most of the recognized cybersecurity frameworks are looking for a best practice cybersecurity solution. So why are we looking at security like this? Things have changed. Cyber attacks are way up. This is something, that's one phrase I think probably gets mentioned on every single call that we have in our program, but it's true. And when I started switching my MSP to be a security focused MSP, probably about 5 years ago now, I mean, that's essentially what happened, was realizing things have changed and the attacks were on the rise at that point. It was getting harder to sleep at night without worrying about, what's going to happen if one of my clients gets breached, what happens if, my company gets breached. And it was just kind of a wake up moment where, things have to change. We have to start doing things differently in order to be able to sleep better at night. And since then, the attacks have continued to go up on an exponential rate. So this is something that is real. It is going on out there, and you don't want to be caught with your pants down and learn it the hard way. So how do you need to do that? You need to start being the expert for your clients. The biggest problem that we have with clients right now is that they, like I said, they do not understand that this stuff is real, that this is really going on, that it's going to happen to them. They always think that they're too small. It's not something that happens in their little area. And we see some of these objections and excuses with MSPs as well. Like they haven't run across this yet. And we see this every single day. A lot of times, kind of the news cycle has gotten a little bit numb to the fact that this stuff is going on. So aside from local newspapers, local small little news organizations, the small business, medium-sized businesses don't make the news when this kind of stuff happens. I mean, sure, you see, some of the larger, corporations that have this happen in the news, but it really, it's not newsworthy, and it perpetuates the myth that small businesses aren't getting attacked when all of the statistics say otherwise. To the tune of 80+%, the number of attacks that are reported are small and medium-sized businesses. It's a very small fraction that there's those large businesses that are happening, that are making the news. So one of the things we need to do is embrace our expertise. We need to understand, and I think this is something that we see with a lot of new members. It's a little bit of imposter syndrome, a little bit of not understanding and not fully realizing, hey, we're in this industry. Most of us have been in this industry for a while. We've at least been in this industry before we got into the MSP business. So we know what's going on, and we need to embrace our expertise and understand that we are the experts, and we need to approach things that way. Like having that mindset of I'm the expert when you're going in and talking to a client or a prospect really changes the ball game and how that conversation goes. We can't let them dictate the path of behavior. You can't go to them and say, hey, we're an IT provider. What services do you want? Here's our menu. That's just not how it works today. You're the one that needs to be the expert. You know what they need. Think about the tools and things that you put in for your own business. You know that that's what they need in theirs. And we talked about this, I think, probably several times over the last couple of weeks. If you allow them to just pick and choose what they want, you're really doing them a disservice. And in a lot of ways, you're putting them more at risk than when you entered the picture in the first place.
Well, and it's also totally about cost then, because, and this is one thing that I want to talk to you guys specifically about. This is this statement that's on the screen, probably the most important mindset shift you're going to have in this entire thing. But what's also important is to realize that your clients they're potentially going to be upset about this. Now, I understand that. I know it's a hard discussion. I know it's a hard conversation. Ryan's going to talk about the CSRA here in a little bit again as well. But this is why you have to reframe how you sell. This is why you have to change the discussion. This is why you have to show them the why. They have to understand their risk is real. They have to understand, even if they're a one-person shop, they have things hackers want. Namely, the hackers want your bank account. They want your money. They want all this stuff. And if you think that you're not at risk, you're wrong. And it's really important that you know that, believe that, and stand on your pedestal and say, this is how it's going to be. And you have to embrace that no. And that's difficult sometimes. So you have to be prepared to handle those objections. That's where our sales coaching and training and all that stuff. And we covered that again in those first 4 weeks. And we're going to be coming back on in a few weeks here again with Cindy Phillips to talk about this again. But it's really important that you understand that.
And kind of the analogy that I like to use to really put it in a perspective for people is we cannot treat our MSPs like we're a grocery store, where the customer comes in and they pick and choose what they want off the shelf. With what's going on today and with the way that cyber attacks are going on, you need to think of yourself more in line with like a doctor or a lawyer, like the expert that people come to and say, I don't know what to do because this isn't my world. You tell me what to do. And then, you're not typically second guessing and changing and prescribing different drugs that your doctor tells you. You're following their advice because you know that they're the trusted expert in their field. So we need to do a better job of educating people. This is, again, like one of the biggest barriers that we have is the people that we're talking to don't understand what's going on. IT in general is something that they really don't understand. They think we're kind of magical. When you start talking about cybersecurity, it takes it to a whole nother level. Now we're talking fairy tales to most prospects. So the biggest piece that we need to do is provide them that education, which again is why we start every engagement with that cybersecurity risk assessment, so we can help let them know what's going on so they can make that educated decision. And that's really where we need to be. We were just having a conversation in our internal Facebook group with one of the members who is having trouble because they've got a new MSP in their area that's just coming in and just lowball pricing everybody. And he's having a hard time trying to figure out how to combat against that. And when we were talking to him, all we said was, continue to follow the play. The difference between what they're doing and what you're doing is they're just coming in with a low price. You're coming in and you're educating them on what's actually going on out there. And what happens 9 times out of 10 when you do that, the prospect or the customer, while they may have had that lower price in mind in their hand, nobody's ever talked to them about this stuff before. So when they look at that, that instantly, makes you the expert, because all these other MSPs that have come and talked to them previously really typically don't talk to them about security. So this is something new. And if you can do it properly and educate people, you're telling them something that they didn't know before. And now they've got, they're embedded on you as the expert. So when we talk about security, this, the MSP stack in general, the security today is really the most important part. And it's something that you really need to be focused on. So when we talk about being security minded, security first, that's got to be the core of your stack these days. When we talked about the support stack last week, I mentioned, to me, that's the easy part these days. It's the stuff that all MSPs are doing. The important stuff, the thing that really makes you a differentiator these days is if you're doing security and kind of leading the pack with what we need to be doing and not letting your clients dictate the path, because we're seeing it every day where clients, who didn't think that they needed these things because all of their other business owner friends have never, told them about, getting hacked before. Now, all of a sudden they're in a situation where they're getting hacked and they're going, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I did need some of that stuff, or what's going on? Nobody told me I needed this kind of thing. So it's really important that you do this. And you're going to get people all the time that try and continue to dictate the path of behavior because it's something that they're used to. It's what they've learned over the years. We've allowed them to think this way. So you're going to get people who are like, okay, I kind of get it. I need some security, but I don't think I need that. I don't think I need that. Remember, you're the expert. They don't understand what that piece or that piece does. And this is where you really got to be careful about getting in the weeds when you're talking to them too, because they don't understand what a lot of these tools do, the purpose and things like that. But what you got to remember, if you're going to sacrifice something, maybe sacrifice something out of the support end of the stack. Don't include all of the support, but never sacrifice anything in the security stack. All of these layers are important.
Well, you and I talked a couple of weeks ago about the precious metal plans, and if you guys don't know what we're talking about, it's the silver, gold, platinum, the good, better, best model. And this is really why that model is dead. You have to now, if you wanted your good, better, best to be all-inclusive security, all-inclusive security, and all-inclusive security, and then it's just taking out help desk for your lesser one, or taking out help desk and on-site support in any capacity for your lesson. Okay, that is what it is, but at least the security is standardized. But I think it's really important to understand that almost every MSP that's out there, if given scenarios with, hey, if all your clients had unlimited budget, would you put in the good, the better, or the best? Everybody says, well, I'd put in the best. Why aren't you? Well, my client doesn't want to spend the money. Make sure you educate them why. That's where the cybersecurity risk assessment, and then leading that into, okay, fine, you don't have to have this, but let's not forget that your liability is at stake here as well. So I know Ryan will talk about that in a minute.
And don't assume either. Like, we had another conversation, in the big Facebook group with somebody who, and it wasn't clear from their statement whether it was an assumption or whether they had actually heard that. But we have seen this before, where people assume that their client or the prospect isn't going to be able to afford the services that they're providing, the proper cybersecurity services that they need. And they make that assumption, and then they don't pitch what's actually needed. The problem with something like that is if you just pitch them what you think that they can afford, and I don't really understand the assumption at that point anyway, because most of the time you have no idea what they can afford. But if you assume that going into it, and then they get breached, somebody clicks on something that they shouldn't, and the insurance company comes to you and says, hey, why weren't you doing these things that everybody knows you need to be doing to protect them? I didn't think they could afford it, isn't going to fly. And now all of a sudden you're the one who's potentially on the hook for that liability. So always pitch what you know that they need. I would say, back to this point, don't sacrifice any of the security stack. You need to take a stand. This is what we know is needed these days. But at the very minimum, make sure you're always pitching exactly what you know that they need right off the bat, because you don't want to be the one holding the bag at the end when the insurance company comes and says, why didn't you tell them this? You should know this. You should know better. You're in this industry.
Yeah. And we've actually, for any of you that are sitting there on the other side saying, oh, that's not going to happen to me, or my clients don't care, I'm never going to see this. We had a scenario that we literally watched unfold live in front of us. One of our members, this was about a year ago, I think it was in our Dallas event, just before our Dallas event, this happened. He went through this entire scenario where he ran our entire process on a break fix, non-profit client. They ended up getting breached. Thankfully, he had put the things in place that we recommended that they put. In fact, they did a breach. They ended up doing a pretty large business email compromise with a large international wire transfer that went along with it. They tried blaming the MSP, and he had done all the stuff, and he ended up getting, basically absolved of any guilt. And they came back and they blamed the client and said, we're not going to pay your claim because you should have done what your IT guy recommended. So big factors.
Yep. And so if that's not enough to scare you, another thing, regulation's coming, whether we like it or not. It's these types of things tend to move a little bit slower than normal, but regulation is coming. So you're going to have to do this kind of stuff eventually. Now is the time to be prepared for it. So you're not left, trying to play catch up. Like I said earlier, this is not something where you can decide overnight that you're going to provide full layered cybersecurity services to your clients. There is a ramp up where you need to go through this. You need to learn the tools. You need to figure out which tools that you need to implement, which vendors you're going to use for all of this, how you're going to organize all of this. Now's the time to start doing this, because if you wait until regulation does hit, you're going to be caught behind and you're just going to get eaten alive with this type of stuff. Insurance is really driving a lot of this. Most of the policies that we're seeing, most of the questionnaires that are going out to people, to businesses are, requiring proper cybersecurity infrastructure. Some of them are more detailed than others, but all of them kind of hit a lot of the major points. And they keep adding and adding and adding to this, like every quarter, where we see, a 4-page document questionnaire, an 8-page document questionnaire. I've seen 12-page insurance questionnaires asking about different cybersecurity tools. You also don't want to be going back and forth to your clients and with your handout every time the insurance company adds something new to their list. This, following a nationally recognized cybersecurity framework is going to put you ahead of where the insurance companies are, because let's be honest, they're catching up, but they're still probably 2-3 years behind where they need to be for the threats that we're seeing.
Well, and we also see a lot, and this is something I want everyone that's watching to understand. You are going to be in a scenario where you have your client that talks to their local agent, and the agent's like, well, you don't need this. They're just a salesperson.
Yep.
So get in front of them and educate them. Talk to the branch, talk to the group, make sure they understand why, and make sure so this gives you also an opportunity to build a vendor relationship, or maybe a referral partner relationship with that insurance branch too. Because most of these people are just salespeople. That's all they are. So they only know what's being told to them from above. And usually it's not very good.
Yep, they are some of the best referral partners in this industry, because there's a lot of them. They don't expect you to send every little bit of business that you talk to as a regular referral to them. The biggest piece for them value-wise is the education that you can provide that helps them speak to their customers about cybersecurity in a more knowledgeable way. Because, like Chris said, most of them don't know any more than their customers do about this. So they're kind of just hitting some bullet points. So we can really help and provide some value for them. One of the other things insurance is catching up on is proper incident response and forensics. We talked about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago as well. It's not just, hey, a breach occurs, wipe and reload. If you want to try and file a claim with most insurance companies these days, they require that you use an incident response firm, a specialized incident response firm that does forensics, because they need to know how the attacker got in. They need proof that the attacker is no longer has access to your systems, because that's something that happens all the time, where an IT company comes in, thinks that they can handle incident response, and then that company ends up getting breached again, a couple weeks down the road, because they never fully got the attacker out of the system. They never realized how the attacker gained access in the first place. A lot of them just wipe and reload the machines and call it a day, or reset some passwords. You really need to be doing this these days, because a lot of insurance companies aren't even going to entertain your claim without doing the proper incident response and forensics.
Yep.
And so the moral here is you don't want to be the one that's eating their risk sandwich. It's our job as the experts to tell them that this stuff is happening. It's their decision at the end of the day. So we need to give them all of the information so that they can make that decision. And then they need to make the decision on whether or not they understand that and they're going to go with our recommendations like they should because we're the experts, or whether they're going to accept that risk and they're going to sign a document saying that they are going to eat that risk sandwich. So, the example that Chris just talked about, that's exactly what happened. They decided, hey, all that information was great, but we don't think this is necessary. We don't know anybody else who's ever had this happen to them. We're good with where we're at. We'll sign your document. Or in this case, it's not even a signed document. It's just a statement that you've had this conversation with them and they've accepted the risk. And then when shit hit the fan, then that document comes back out and the insurance company says, hey, you've had this conversation. You turned down these services. The fault's on you.
Yeah. And I think it's really important that you, as the expert, go out of your way to, at the very least, have this conversation with them, notify them, tell them this is where you stand. This is how we're going to handle these incidents. Because one of the things that we've all seen is these MSP clients, they want when stuff blows up. And Cindy Phillips is our head sales coach here at Seven Figure MSP. And she uses this analogy of, well, everyone that we know has been in a fender bender, right? And the second that fender bender happens, everyone's like, oh, are you okay? Are you okay? Everyone's making sure everybody's okay. And then as soon as everybody's okay, it starts going down this path of who's to blame. And everyone is trying to get everyone else blamed for it. And that's got a very specific reason because they're going to insurance, and insurance is going to force them. If you're negligent, it's very possible you're going to get either a check mark or not paid, right?
Yep. Something
important to think about.
So now the moment you've all been waiting for, what does a 7-figure cybersecurity stack look like? So again, this is probably the hottest topic question that comes up in a lot of our posts with the back and forth. One of the things that I like to start with here is, and I keep trying to hammer this home, follow a framework. Cybersecurity is not just about throwing random tools at a solution. You're not going to go to a conference and talk to a bunch of vendors and all of a sudden have a cybersecurity stack just because you chose a bunch of tools with the slickest talkers at the coolest looking booths with the coolest merch. You need to follow a specific framework. This is going to be your guide, your roadmap, your blueprint to what a cybersecurity best practices layered approach looks like. And there's a bunch of them out there. So some of the more common examples that we see are CIS version 8 is the current version, NIST, CMMC. But just choose something is really the advice that I give to people. Unless you have a specific, if you're targeting a specific niche like defense contractors, then obviously you're probably going to be looking at CMMC. If you're not working with existing clients that have a specific requirement, just pick one. All of these are very, very similar in what they require. They just list them out. The controls are done differently. Most of them include mapping so that you can figure out, like if you built your stack around CIS version 8 and you need to see how that maps to the controls of NIST, most of them have mapping to teach you that kind of thing. We don't know at this point. We talked about regulation coming. Nobody knows at this point, if any of the existing frameworks are going to be the basis for the regulation, if a brand new one's going to come out. Kind of the moral of the story here is all of them are so related. If you choose one and build towards that one, and then government regulation comes out and it has something else entirely, you're not going to be that far off from adjusting things.
I think a combo, personally, of what I've seen, being a kind of non-security guy, I've seen a combo of CIS and NIST being a great fix.
Those two are very, very related. Right. In fact, like the CIS version 8 controls will specifically highlight within those controls what tenets of NIST that they follow.
And I do believe the CompTIA cybersecurity trust mark that they're reviewing. I know I'm pretty good friends with MJ Shore over at CompTIA. We go, he's way older than me. I hope he's watching this. But we go pretty far back, and he kind of manages a lot of that stuff. And it's really good to see that they're adopting that CIS 8 framework.
Yes. Yeah. And I like CIS just from a standpoint of the way that they break it out into individual groupings. So they've got 3 implementation groups. So you can kind of start from the bottom and phase these things in depending on how quickly you need to get ramped up, or where you think your need is from a business maturity level or a posture level. So it's a nice, good entry level way of getting into it. Plus, like you said, if the new cybersecurity trust mark is going to be following that, it's getting you your best foot forward to go after that.
Yep.
And so we talked a little bit about the tenets of NIST, and this is something I like to talk about a lot because it really simplifies down kind of what to think about when you're talking about cybersecurity and the different aspects of it. Identify, I think, is one of the big ones that a lot of people don't think about, particularly end customers, because everybody's always thinking about protect. Let's do everything that we can to stop what's going on. But if you're not identifying the things that you have and the risk of where it is, identify is a big piece of what we do for the cybersecurity risk assessments. But you need to know what's going on. You need to constantly be monitoring for these things. You need to plan for any of those protection and detection layers to fail at any given point, which is why layers are so important. Because if 1 or 2 of those different layers fail, you need to have something else in place that's going to help. And at the end of the day, you need to be able to recover just in case something does happen.
I personally think, while identify and protect is awesome and very critical, detect, respond, recover is your most important piece, really, because, and I asked this question, Ryan, you see me ask this question 20 plus times. Who that's watching this can prevent all breaches, hacks, compromises? You just can't. It's not going to happen. So you have to have a plan. And that plan should involve, namely, detect, respond, recover. What is that? Obviously, identify and protect is key, but detect, respond, and recover is mission critical.
Yep. Because you just have to come to that realization. And you can't give somebody, we talk about liability a little bit. You can't give your customers the impression that you're going to be able to stop all of these attacks. You may not explicitly be saying it, but you look at the other things that you're doing and the actions that you're taking. You can't give them even the assumption that that's what you're trying to convey to them, and having things in place so that way, if something happens, I had a customer that we helped through a breach of their prospect. They called us. They were ransomware. We did the incident response for them, got them back up and running, got them on a cybersecurity plan going forward. And that was one of the questions that they had before they signed the paperwork for the ongoing service going forward. Like, so does this mean that this is never going to happen again? And I had to reiterate what we had already talked about. No, nobody can say that 100% that this can't happen again. What I can tell you, though, is that it's going to make it a lot less likely that it's going to happen. We're minimizing your risk significantly. If it does happen, the likelihood that it will be as widespread is a lot less. It's more likely to be controlled. So instead of all of your computers getting ransomed, in theory, only 1, 2, we can stop it because we're identifying and detecting and things like that. And we're going to be able to recover you quickly if and when something like this happens. So it's really important that people understand that and the whole encompassing idea of what we're trying to do. So now we're going to get into the specific tools. I like to break these down by categories because as we talked about in the first couple of weeks that we were together, everybody's got a little bit different recipe for chicken soup. The categories, I think, are the really important ones. What specific tools you choose to match those categories is completely up to you. There's a ton of good tools out there. We're going to talk about some examples. Some of them are vendor partners that we work with frequently. Some of them are not, but there's a lot of good partners out there. Really, you just want to go through and make sure that you're checking the boxes. Again, I mapped all of these back to CIS version 8. The other thing, that's a good point. The other thing I want to mention, this is specifically the tools. So when I talk about cybersecurity frameworks, the tools is a fraction of the overall cybersecurity framework. A lot of cybersecurity framework is policy. It's written policies, processes and procedures, things that you're supposed to do. We cannot control everything with tools. We can control a lot, and we can put technology policies in place to protect and prevent certain things. But there's examples out there where we just can't protect it, and it's important that the customer and that you internally have these policies and procedures in place to know what to do. So you may have a SaaS application that you can't control what the end users do from a perspective of password policy or MFA. So you need to have written policies so your people understand that they have certain requirements as far as how to set up their password, and they need to have a certain number of characters and all of that, that they need to have MFA enabled because we can't control everything. So they need to make sure that they're aware of the overall big picture. So the first category of tools is centralized account management. So this goes into being able to, this is a little bit of an overlap with support, but I think at the end of the day, this makes more sense in the security stack. You want to make sure that you have control as much as possible over the account management, the policies, and ability for people to access certain things and not access certain things. 365 Azure Active Directory is probably one of the most popular ones out there. I'm a big fan of that. It's a really good solution for the flexible work environments that we're dealing with today, where people aren't always on site at the company office. They may be in a coffee shop. They may be working from home. Azure Active Directory is a very good means of working with those types of customers. Obviously, we have the traditional Active Directory environments that a lot of people are used to. Jump Cloud is another player in the game that I know some people that use kind of a mixture of some of those things. So those are really good ones. But you want to have something centralized. You don't want to have your end users basically just logging into local accounts. You have very little control with that kind of thing. So making sure that you have some sort of centralized account management in place is really helpful and key. Mobile device management is another one. So we're seeing, again, kind of going with the work from anywhere, flexible work environment type scenario. We're seeing a lot more people who are utilizing their phones to do a lot of their day-to-day business. I know, Chris, for example, how much of your work week did you say is probably on your phone versus on your laptop?
At this point, I try and do as much as I can on my phone, but I mean, there's certain things that I just can't.
Yeah.
But I'd say 60% of my work is on my
phone.
So
it's a key component. I mean, you still have to realize that you have people who are accessing company data on those types of devices, and you need to treat that.
I think that should be a number one goal. And it's very similar. It's funny. I talk about marketing a lot more than I talk about any of this stuff really in our world, right? It's funny to me how many people still make websites for browsers on PCs. Because what is your consumer consuming all the websites on? They're all on this. They're all on their phones.
Absolutely.
So you got to think about workers and what they're doing. And I know our MSP that we use, our security company, it's a company called B Suite, Bart Barsowitz out of Chicago. He treats us, all of our phones are handled. Everything is handled the same. And he does it mostly through Intune and managing it through that way. I don't even know all the ins and outs of it, but the phones are a critical piece of it for us.
Yep. And it's something to consider. I mean, it's also something to be prepared for too, because a lot of businesses, you're going to have a choice between either providing mobile devices for the end users or, how you're going to handle BYOD. So, Microsoft Intune, I think, is a really good solution for that because of the way that they are able to segment the control. The profiles that get pushed out only control the company data. But you are also going to need, going back to frameworks and having written policies. You need to have things in place that dictate how BYOD devices are handled, what the expectation is for the end users on those types of things. So again, Intune is a really good one right now that covers the whole gamut. Adigy and Jamf are very Apple-specific ones that I know a lot of people use for more Apple-centric environments. Intune will also manage Apple devices, but those are a couple examples of some things for mobile device management. Managed Security Operations Center. This is one that we talk about all the time, and this is another one that we're starting to see specifically being mentioned and required in insurance applications, right, Chris? So we specifically recommend managed, and I think we've talked about this a little bit over the last couple of weeks as well. Trying to spin up your own security operations center is going to be very, very costly. There are many providers out there that provide managed security operations center solutions. Highwire Networks in total are two that we work very closely with in our program, but there's a lot of them out there. It really helps to have the right people in the right seats in a scalable cost center. to where you're not having to spin up all of that front end cost to have your SOC, but you've got those solutions that you're able to provide your customers at a price that makes sense and can fit in their budget. But you've got those security experts that you can use whenever you need them for the various things and tools that the SOC provides.
Yeah. And there's a lot of MSPs that tell me, I hear this, and Ryan, every single time we have a live event or I'm at an industry event, I ask MSPs if they have a fully managed SOC, and they're like, I don't need that. I have a help desk. I have every single time I talk to an MSP, not every MSP, but every single time I go to an MSP event, including our own, I get that rebuttal. And I'm going to tell you guys, I had a call with Highwire a couple weeks ago. Also had a call with Darren Swan over at Total. We did a long webinar, and I presented that to both those guys. Yep. In fact, we had the gentleman from Highwire on here a couple weeks ago when we were on, and they almost laugh at it. Yeah. Like, it's a totally different thing. Like, I understand that, but the MSP fully believes, because we all spun up our own help desk. I get that. We spun up our own help desk. We spun up our own support team, but it is not a 24/7, fully manned, fully managed security operations center. You can't do it on your, okay, I'm not gonna say you can't do it on your own, but it's not very feasible for you to do it on your own.
And you probably can't do all of it on your own. There's some things you're probably going to be able to do on your own, but not all of it. And you've got the 24/7 thing to factor in. Some of this stuff, you just see some question marks and it gets complicated. So it's nice to have somebody in your corner that can be able to look at this information and give you an idea of what's really going on, that's specifically trained in this. And a lot of these managed SOC offerings are able to combine a lot of different things. So, the next tool that we're going to talk about here is endpoint detection and response. I know for a fact that Highwire and Total, they take the data and the telemetry from the EDR products that they work with and that they offer and put it into the larger ecosystem. And they look at all of that data as one larger picture. So they're not just seeing, here's what's happening on this endpoint. They're seeing, here's some questionable activity on an endpoint, and we're matching that up with data we're seeing from the SIM and data that we're seeing from their cloud environments, to see, is there actually something larger going on here, as opposed to just something weird that somebody maybe tried to install on their endpoint. So it's being able to take all of that stuff and look at the big picture from a trained perspective. SentinelOne is a common EDR as well. I believe SentinelOne now offers a managed product through their system as well. I personally like the larger managed SOC offerings, just because of what I said, where they're able to take not just that telemetry, but other telemetry from other instances and pull it all together and pool it. Another thing to add to that is they're not just looking at your telemetry in a lot of cases. They're combining that to see what's happening across all of their client bases, to see if there's some sort of larger attack vector going on. Data encryption, I think this is another one that maybe people are a little bit sleepy on. So things like BitLocker and FileVault are built into Windows and Mac OS. So those are definitely good. I think most people probably understand the need for those and have those enabled typically by default. I would also make sure that you've got other things in place as double checks, whether your RMM is looking to make sure that those things are enabled and they don't get turned off accidentally, or having things like Intune and compliance policies to make sure that in order for a device to touch company data, it has to check those boxes like encryption. But some other things to really look at, BitLocker and FileVault are encrypting things at rest. If you are logged into those computers, the TPM chip is unlocking those. If somebody has active access, remote access to your machine, that data is unlocked when you're logged in. So something like BitLocker and FileVault, while it technically satisfies most cybersecurity framework controls, if you've got a client that has more robust and more secure data that they need to protect, you may want to look at another solution such as Actifile and Beachhead, two of the examples that we use here, where that data is actively being encrypted even when you're logged in. It decrypts it as you use the file, but if it's not being used actively, it's fully encrypted right there, then and there. And they've got other features as well. So a little bit more robust features for data encryption.
And one thing that I definitely see out in the wild is there's confusion between data at rest encryption and data in motion encryption. There definitely is that, because there's a lot of responses I get from MSPs on posts and just seeing things on Reddit and all over the place. that they fully believe that they're in safe harbor when they have BitLocker installed.
Right.
And that's just not the case, guys. Like there's a major, like if a laptop gets stolen and they pull out the hard drive, okay, that's one thing. But we're talking about data in motion. Like if a hacker gets access to my laptop right now, it's unlocked. BitLocker does nothing for that. Like it's only if it's at rest. So it's the stuff you got to at least, nobody's saying you got to know everything about all this stuff, but you should at least know the basic common pieces.
And just think about it. I mean, your RMM tool, most RMM tools out there, if the user's logged in onto the machine, will give you access to scroll through their file structure. So that data is just as easily accessible for a hacker who may have a foothold in that machine as your RMM tool is able to do. So definitely something to consider. MFA, this one probably goes pretty much without saying. You need to have MFA on there. I think we're easily at the point now where, I wouldn't even entertain the thought of a risk acceptance notification for a client that refuses to use MFA. Like this is just this gets to the gross negligence piece where if you're allowing clients to operate without MFA wherever possible, I think you're falling into the gross negligence category. This is just something that we know needs to be done. It's probably the biggest bang for your buck as far as security is concerned. But the other caveat being, don't rest on this as the end all be all of security. We are seeing a lot of instances where attackers are finding ways around MFA, whether it's through MFA fatigue attacks, where they just keep constantly pinging the MFA until somebody accepts it or puts in a code. We are seeing things like token hijacking. So they get into the machine somehow and they hijack the token that shows that machine has already past MFA, and they install that token on another machine, and then they've got full access without that. So while this is something that is the best bang for your buck, probably don't let this be your only layer. Don't fall asleep at the wheel with MFA. So some good examples, Microsoft 365 and conditional access enforcement of MFA. You want to get a little bit more stringent, you got Duo, Okta. There's a couple other options out there as well, but these probably be the most popular.
Perimeter. Yeah, one thing I want to say on this too, you guys notice how Ryan's got a couple of different tools listed here on the screen? Great. We are a vendor agnostic group, vendor agnostic community. We have partners that we partner with, but find something that works for you. We're not saying cancel all your stuff and use this. Right. I mean, obviously we would love you to see you support our vendor partners, but make sure you're doing something. And we're giving you some reference points, but it doesn't have to be that.
And that's why I'm focusing on the categories and giving a couple examples, and the stack guide checklist that we're going to have for you guys as well is the categories. So it gives you the things that you need to get whatever vendor you feel the most comfortable with. Some of these vendors have overlap where they may be able to satisfy multiple things in those categories. So long as you're checking those boxes, that's really what's important at the end of the day. Perimeter security is an interesting one. So this is, I think this is one that we're going to see change quite a bit. I think we're in the middle of those changes right now. So kind of the traditional example of perimeter security is unified threat management appliances. So common examples of that would be FortiGate and Sophos. So this is going to be the next generation hardware-based firewalls that are in the on-premises locations. What I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of is more of the SASE-based solutions. Talk again about the flexibility and people working from multiple locations, working from home 2 or 3 days a week. So they're not in the office all the time. They still have that same need for perimeter security. But obviously, it doesn't make any sense to put UTM devices in all of your employees' homes. And you still can't control things like them going someplace else, like a coffee shop or what have you. I think the SASE space is really starting to evolve. One of the struggles that it had early on was stability. If you think about it, if a SASE platform has an issue, not only are the people who are in the office going down, but pretty much anybody who's connected to that POP is going down. This has come a long way in the last 1.5 to 2 years. So just some examples of some good SASE products out there: Total, Citricom, Highwire Networks. And so for those of you who aren't aware, Secure Access Service Edge is SASE. So think about it as a cloud-based firewall, cloud-based UTM, cloud-based network system. They're using agents on the devices themselves, and that agent creates a secure tunnel through that to that SASE solution. So they're basically connected to a UTM no matter where they are. So it's a really cool, really flexible solution that really help.
That was just such a simple explanation too, by the way, that they're connected to a UTM no matter where they are. And I think that's a really, really good way of putting it. And it's because the whole term SASE gets like a little confusing.
Yep.
But I think that's a really good way of saying it.
Yep. And I love it. This is something that we were using for the last year and a half, 2 years for a lot of our clients, just because it was so controllable and so easy. We didn't have to worry about where people were. Yes, we had different things as far as conditional access and other policies to really limit unauthorized access to company data, but this additional perimeter security piece, even when they were at a Starbucks, for example, was something that really helped. Another aspect that helps you sleep a little bit better at night. Vulnerability and network monitoring. This is one of those ones that I think a lot of people are very easy to disregard, and I think it's a really big mistake. And there are several security controls in all of the frameworks that deal with this. And it's really important to understand and look at things from a vulnerability standpoint. And as far as network monitoring, keeping track of what's showing up specifically on your corporate networks, because you never know when somebody might plug something in that they shouldn't, or join something to the company Wi-Fi that they shouldn't. There's a lot of different ways to control that, but at the end of the day, you also need to make sure that you're monitoring just in case somebody finds some goofy way to get something connected that shouldn't be there. Looking at things from a vulnerability standpoint, as opposed to a patching standpoint, is really critical. Third-party patching, OS patching, it can be hit or miss. Sometimes those things fail. We're typically monitoring to make sure that those get taken care of. But you really have to look at it from a vulnerability standpoint, because third-party patching in particular can be hectic at best. But you may have a software or hardware on the network that has a vulnerability that a patch doesn't exist for. And you need to be aware of those instances so you can take action to either segregate it, accept the risk, but you need to know about that. So constant ongoing vulnerability scanning is really, really important. Don't put all of your trust into the patching of the OS and the third-party patching. Make sure you're aware of what's going on. Cyber CNS, which is now Connect Secure, is a good example of this. Nodeware, Highwire Networks also offers a managed vulnerability management platform as well. But really something important to look at.
And I will also say this to everyone that's watching. The days of you having your hands in every single tool, mm-hmm. I think from your strategic approach as an MSP owner should be over. You should have partners like Highwire Networks, Total, etc., that are fully managing and you manage the relationship with them. That's where I would go. You have a help desk, you have support people, and you have liaisons. Mm-hmm. That's how you scale your MSP now. So you have fully trusted partners that you can rely on, like Highwire, Total, some of these other companies. And then you become borderline a broker. And I think that's a really good way to scale. You're focused on sales. And if you look at the members that we have in 7-Figure MSP that are the most successful, they have moved themselves out of being an IT company to they are a cybersecurity management and sales firm.
You're basically a general contractor.
Pretty much. I agree with that. Yep.
And then one more thing to add to this too. I was having a conversation with somebody over at Nodeware, and they were talking about how they've gotten a lot of questions about, well, why do I need ongoing vulnerability scanning if I've got an EDR? And that one kind of took me by surprise. I mean, it's not something we see from our members, but I can see how MSPs who maybe aren't as versed in security frameworks can ask that question. It goes back to the idea of like the identify and detect kind of layers versus the protect layer. So an EDR is there to protect, but you need to plan for that EDR to fail. None of them are perfect. And that's probably one of the layers that's most likely to fail out of the whole thing. Yep. So that's why it's important to have something like vulnerability scanning. You need to know that a piece of software, a piece of hardware has a known vulnerability on it, so that and not just sit there and go, okay, well, I know that vulnerability is there, but my EDR is going to protect me. No, you need to make sure that that's patched or segregated or handled, because you can't depend on that. All of these things need to work together as layers. You can never count on one. In fact, you should count on one or two of them failing at any given point.
Yeah, you should be counting on exactly that. You should count on them failing. Yeah. We do have a question here that I want to have you address really quick. I'm not personally super familiar with Untangle, but what's your thoughts on that? I'd say, is that fully managed in any capacity? Is there ability to fully manage it?
I'm not as familiar with Untangle. I believe that has a centralized management platform to it. I don't recall if that would be considered a full-fledged UTM or not, but I don't know the answer to that for sure.
I mean, back in the day when I had my MSP, Jason, it was basically taking the place of a firewall is what it was doing.
Yeah.
But it was self-managed. Everything. Now, I don't know where it's gone since then. I can't really speak to it, but we definitely get that answer for you.
Yeah.
I will say, I don't think we have a single member in our very large membership group in terms of 7-figure MSP clients that are using Untangle. I don't believe.
I think I might know of one, but they're using it in conjunction with a SASE platform. So that's
probably a moot used to use it.
He might be. He wasn't the one I was thinking of.
He had for a while, and I don't know where he's at with that. But
what I would recommend, and the solution that we were running with was using a SASE solution. So we were using Highwire Networks personally, and having a hardware firewall at least still on the local on-premises sites. So we were using pfSense. So I still wanted to have something to control within those environments, to handle things like network traffic, but it didn't need to be a full-fledged UTM. But you want to have something in place. But the majority of the UTM type features and the security network or framework controls that were being solved for were being done through that SASE platform.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the answer. And Jason, we can get deeper in that as we go to later.
For sure.
Okay.
So another big one, which is probably a little bit newer on the scene, is SaaS monitoring and response. Because so much stuff is going to the cloud now. We were to a point where we had hardly any on-premises servers in our environments anymore. Everything was really in the cloud. So making sure that you've got robust monitoring for your SaaS platform. So specifically, if you're using 365 and Intune, making sure that that's being heavily monitored. If you're really using that platform robustly, a lot of the things that are happening within your environment, access to data, logging into the machines, all of that stuff is going through the logs of 365. So having something like SaaS alerts is a really, really good one to monitor those logs and alert you when things are happening. SaaS alerts is a great example because not only does it alert you when unusual things happen. So say, there's a login for one user that's happening in one state, and then 15 minutes later from 3 states over, that's unlikely. You can get an alert on things like that. SaaS alerts is really robust in that it will even alert, depending on your settings, if a certain amount of files were downloaded over a certain amount of time. So you can set those thresholds and see, is there potentially a data exfiltration going on? Do you have an employee at that location that is getting ready to leave the company and is downloading a bunch of the customer files to go steal their customers? So it's really important to see all of that stuff. But because so much is in the cloud, this has become a key piece of monitoring and response. Email security is another one that probably a lot of people know. There was a lot of examples of different email security platforms out there. So I got a few of them here, but there's definitely more than this. But making sure that you have something in place. I mean, email is one of the biggest ways that an attacker is going to get into your system, tricking people to click on things that they shouldn't. This is where things like security awareness training are going to come into play as well. Because there's so many of them out there, this is one where, the way that I explain to people to look at this, none of them are going to be perfect. Avanan, we've got a lot of positive reviews on today. Proofpoint, Iron Scales over the last couple of years, we've had people who have sworn by those. And now people are some certain things are getting through this one and this one. This is where I think a really good example of the importance of the other layers comes into place. None of these are perfect. You're going to have one thing that gets through Microsoft Defender but gets stopped by Avanan, and you're going to have another email that's probably vice versa. Having something in place is key, and then making sure that you have those other layers around to support it, like security awareness training, to hopefully stop people from clicking on things in the first place. To have something like zero trust application management, like a threat locker, to prevent something from running that you didn't authorize to run if they do click on something. So don't get too hung up on the details. None of these platforms are perfect, as much as some of them will swear that they are. None of them are perfect, and that's why you always need to make sure you have those other layers. So I think we keep coming back to that point. You have to count on multiple layers failing at any given point, so you need to have the full package of everything in there. DMARC management kind of goes along with that. So making sure that you've got DMARC set up and you've got the reporting to be able to digest if you need to look at it. Easy DMARC, Redshift, DMARCian. These are some popular ones right now. We just talked a little bit about Threat Locker. I think, and I'm almost positive there are some other ones out there. I'm more familiar with Threat Locker. I was trying to do a little bit of research to see if there were some other zero trust application management platforms out there.
Yeah, there are. I know that, but
yeah,
Threat Locker is definitely the most popular.
Yeah, so they're probably the gold standard, if you will. This was one that to me was my ultimate safety net. If one of the tools that I use gets breached in a supply chain attack, Threat Locker is the piece that I think I have confidence is going to be that last layer of protection to hopefully stop against something like that. Do I count on it not or failing at some point? Absolutely. That's where those respond and recover modules come in. You need to make sure you're still able to do that. Let's see. We got a couple things. I was not aware that Avik. So we've got a question here from Jason. What about Avik Saslio for SaaS monitoring? I'm not familiar with that. I do have something in here about Avik for network monitoring, I believe, or I talked about that last week. I did not know that they had a SaaS monitoring. Again, there's a lot of solutions that fill a lot of these categories. Any one of us is not going to be able to know all of them. I feel like I am pretty well versed dealing with a lot of these vendors, but the point being is so long as you have something that checks that box for that framework, I don't care what it is. Just make sure you're following a framework that gives you those check boxes to follow. All right. Security awareness training. I talked a little bit about this. This is so important. And it's one of those things that I think a lot of people are easy to dismiss. I get it. It's difficult. It's not something customers care as much about. It's usually something where you get a little eye roll. I don't want to take a test. It's really important to do this. And this is another one that almost every insurance questionnaire I've seen has asked if you're doing ongoing security awareness training. So it's something that you absolutely need to have in place.
It's definitely a box you have to check. Yeah. Even if your clients are not doing it, you have to basically have a system in place where you're saying you need to be doing it on a regular basis.
And it's good to emphasize with them, and particularly with the leadership of those companies, and get their buy-in to enforce this. You need to make sure, hey, we're providing this. The insurance companies are requiring this. You can't just say you have it and that checks the box. I mean, that may check the box, but when you have to file a claim and they find out that none of your employees have been taking the security awareness training, now all of a sudden you're non-compliant. So it's really important to make sure that you're offering this at the very least and really impressing upon your clients that how important it really is. Password management. This is another good one that can be difficult to get your clients to buy in on. Again, it's really good to offer it. This one's just difficult because it usually involves a lot of end user training to get them on board. But it's so critical when you go in and you do a cybersecurity risk assessment and you see how many of these businesses have password Word docs or password Excel files, and that's how they're storing and sharing passwords. We really need to make things like password managers more mainstream so people automatically just know how these things work.
And another thing we actively see is businesses, and we mandate all of our members in my 7-figure MSP Inner Circle program that they do cybersecurity risk assessments with every prospect. So it's a mandated thing. It's prospects and existing clients. So one of the things that we see coming back to us is them finding out that their clients are allowing their employees to store their personal passwords in browsers and things like that. That happens a lot. I'm going to say 98% of MSP clients that we actively see prior to CSRA, cybersecurity risk assessment, are storing passwords in browsers.
And they're syncing them to their personal accounts too. So we've seen a lot of high profile big breaches that have started from that, where somebody's home computer got hit. They were able to get into their Gmail account that they're syncing their passwords in their Chrome browser to. Now all of a sudden they've got VPN passwords to a major organization.
Yep. Exactly.
You got to be careful of that kind of stuff. Some extra tools here, full SIM management, security incident and event management. The reason I put this in extra, part of the reason I put this in extras is because of people not being as in the office as much. This is one where, in my opinion, unless there's a specific compliance requirement for them, or they have a lot of data that needs to be secured and they are almost always in the office, these can be a piece of the puzzle. But if people are working from home, something like an on-premises SIM isn't really going to give you a whole lot of data. What I like is a solution like Intune and Microsoft 365, and then combining that with a SaaS monitoring platform, which essentially works like a cloud SIM. So this is one where definitely consider it on a case-by-case basis, but not necessarily a default need. Compliance policies and management platform. This is one I think a lot of people need to start looking at. At the end of the day, right now, unless you are specifically claiming that you are handling compliance management for a company, which I would be very careful about doing, really what we can do in this instance is provide customers with the templates, the proper templates that they need in order to have these written policies. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, it's really on them. It's their responsibility to buy into this and enforce this. But we can definitely be a means of helping them get to where they need to be for these. Ones that have a required compliance requirement, like what we're seeing with FTC safeguards now, HIPAA, CMMC, those are different stories. I think they still need to be the ones who are responsible for enforcing those types of things, but we can definitely help them. But I would also say this is something that is a good idea for companies that aren't under a specific compliance. So, that was what we were doing with CIS version 8. So we kind of built our stack based on that, and we're providing that information for our clients to show that they were following something. But at the end of the day, it was up to them whether or not they wanted to take that step and enforce that from a documents and policy standpoint. Penetration testing is another one that's good to have in your back pocket, because we are starting to see some of the requirements coming down the pipe where they require, at least yearly penetration testing of some kind. So that's another one to kind of look at. And that is the tool stack, folks. So just to give you like a little bit of a review and a wrap up, you want to start every engagement with a CSRA. It's very important that the customer understands what their risk looks like so that they can make an educated decision. This is really critical, because most business owners have no idea what their risk is. We see people all the time. I don't have any personal identifiable information on my systems, and we find it every single time.
Well, I don't have anything the hackers would want. I'm too small to get hacked. All these excuses. And most MSPs, one of the reasons that my coaching program is so successful is because we are teaching the MSP how to have the sales conversation. One of the things that we can do is guarantee that you're going to get double your MRR in 12 months or less. Like, this is how we're doing this. We're having these conversations. We're forcing the MSP to have these conversations with their prospects and most importantly, their existing clients. Yep. And it all starts with the cybersecurity risk assessment.
Absolutely. Another one, standardize your stack to scale. It gets really difficult to scale a business when you have 8 different stacks across all of your different clients. Stacks that you started 5 years ago to your precious metals plans that you were doing yesterday. It really helps to keep your business running like a well-oiled machine, to have a single stack that fits all of the needs that that your customers need, that you can train your techs on a single platform so they don't have to keep relearning everything. Really can't say enough about standardizing your stack. This was something that allowed me to keep my MSP super streamlined to where I was constantly getting questions like, how are you able to operate your MSP with so little staff? Standardize your stack, use managed solutions. There's a lot of different ways that you can do that. And I really think that's the way of the future.
Yeah.
Choose the tools you're using based on where you are going, not where you are at. If you're charging properly for your services, which is something that a lot of MSPs don't do out of the gate, you should be able to use the same tools that everybody else is using. You don't need to go with the budget options when you're just starting out if you're charging properly. You definitely, especially for things like a PSA, it can be really painful to start off with a budget one just because that's what you think you can afford today. And then trying to change all of that data 5 years down the road when you want to get into something that's going to help you scale, that gives you the information that you need to run your MSP business. So really take a look at those decisions based on where you're going, not where you are. And the easy way to do that, like I said, is to charge properly. So make sure that you are charging. We have value in the services that we provide. Even if you're only doing support-based services right now, one of the things you just got to get yourself in the mindset of, yes, this stuff, for techs is easy for us, but it's like learning Mandarin for somebody else. So make sure that you're understanding the value. Don't base your value on the fact that it's easy for you. Base the value on what that value is for somebody else who doesn't know how to do these types of things. If you're charging properly from the beginning, you're going to have the cash flow to be able to run your business and scale your business properly and much faster.
When we say charge properly, that means looking at an 80% margin. Gross margin is where you should be.
Absolutely. Avoid chasing tools. This is another rabbit hole that I think people get stuck in, where they're constantly evaluating every new tool that comes down the pipe. You can, if you were to quantify the amount of time that you spend looking at tools, I think a lot of you would probably be surprised. I know when I think about that, I have no idea how much time some of that time was spent, but I know it was more than, in hindsight, what I needed to be doing. Make sure that you get the solution that you need in place, and then schedule when you're evaluating tools based on when the commitments for those tools come up. So don't spend all year looking at all the different RMMs that are out there. If you're thinking about switching your RMM, start looking 3 or 4 months before that agreement expires on that one. So really narrowly focus things so you can focus on what you need to do, and don't just change things as because of the wind blew a different direction. Adjust as necessary when you're doing these things. Don't just adjust for the sake of it, but also at the same time be flexible. Understand, especially with the security stuff, new threats are constantly emerging. Security tools in particular are still trying to kind of find their way. So everybody's doing things a little bit differently. The security tool or the security vendor that you're using today may not be the same good fit for you 8 months down the road. So you may want to start looking at those types of things.
Well, it's very easy for you guys, personality wise, to play with tools.
Yep.
They're kind of like toys a little bit because we like them and they're fun. And it's funny because I see an MSP vetting new tools. We see this all the time, right? We see MSPs vetting tools every week, and then they're like, well, I don't have any time for marketing or sales.
Right.
Okay, well, you just vetted the same tool, like the same category of tool, like 6 times, and you spent like 14 hours on it. What do you do?
Right.
Well, that's important. I mean, yes, it's important, but it's more important to have cash flow so you can do these things.
And I would argue that the marketing was way more important, because how much time, you spend 14 hours evaluating those tools, and then a lot of people don't even make a change at that point. So it's good to know what's out there, but be conscious of the time that you spend on it.
Yep.
And make sure that you are security first. Cyber attacks are way up. You need to be aware of this. You need to make sure that you're prepared. You need to make sure that your customers are prepared, because if you're not taking this approach, if you're not looking at security first, and you're not having these discussions with your clients, they will get breached, and either they or their insurance company or both are going to come back to you and say, why weren't you doing the things that you were supposed to be doing to protect me? Why didn't you at least have that conversation with me to let me know, because we didn't know that this was real? You need to make sure that you're having these conversations. You need to be the expert. You need to follow and make sure that you're doing security first. And to do that, you need to follow a framework. Don't just throw tools at a solution. Don't just say, hey, I'm going to do cybersecurity tomorrow and add an EDR and think that you're good. Cybersecurity is not any 1 or 2 or 3 tools. It's a layered approach. It's a framework. It's a blueprint. You need to solve for those controls, and you need to figure out what tools actually solve for those controls as you're building your solution.
Yep.
So make sure you're educating yourself. And at the end of the day, the most important thing, I think, is be the expert. This is something that we've dug our own hole in this by allowing our customers to dictate the path of behavior for years and years and years. Things need to change. We need to have a mindset shift, both in our own minds and in our customers and our prospects' minds. IT is an expert field. It is not a grocery store. You need to make sure that you're telling them what they need based on your experience, not letting them tell you what they need based on no experience. So be the expert.
Well, and also understand that I get that they don't have budget for it. They have budget for it. They all do. Every single business has money available. But here's the challenge. They've never had to spend that way before. They've never spent their money on it. So you have to show them why. That's why you do the CSRA. That's why you lead with security. And you're going to have people that are upset. You're going to have people that say no. Embrace your no. Make them take on the liability and the breach incident scenarios in full. Embrace your no and draw a line in the sand and say, okay, that's fine. I'll service your account, but here's what's going to happen when you get hit.
And it's counterintuitive too. Like when you say no and embrace your no, like you think you're kind of walking away from a deal, but that's when they realize, wait a minute, maybe this is real.
Maybe this is real. Exactly. Okay, I know we got a couple things. We're a few minutes over here. Yep. Ryan, you have your tech stack checklist. Now, this is basically the checklist to kind of walk through all the stuff we have in every single scenario. You guys, so it gives you all of you that are watching this, the ability to download this and then check it off. Here's the things that I have in my stack. And if you need help with this, come talk to us. This is what we do in our coaching program. We teach you how to sell first, but we embrace the tech stack. This is all stuff that we put in place to make sure that you're CYA, but also you're getting paid for it so you can actually afford to do things the right way for your clients. Okay. Anything else, Ryan? Thanks for doing all that. I think you killed it today, brother.
Come to the show in Nashville. We're going to have a good time.
Yeah. The QR code, you guys can take your phone, scan it right on the screen right there. And we have our keynote speaker on day 2 is going to be Mr. Chris Voss from wrote the book, Never Split the Difference. Super excited about that. That being said, Ryan, I know we're a little bit late. Let me see. We got a couple comments here. Jason, great job on that. Jason was just hammering us with questions today. Appreciate it. Jason, we'll see you in the program one of these days. Okay, buddy. And we'll talk soon. Ryan, next week, we have Lindsay Badillo back here. We got 4 weeks of marketing training back with us. And then we got 4 weeks of Cindy Phillips, and then we'll be back here with Ryan after that. So we'll see you guys next week, Wednesday. And Ryan O'Hara, great job. Hope you're feeling better, my brother. And we'll see you soon. All right. See you guys. Bye-bye.